It's Joe. I have to tell you, I don't get it. These people are acting like children. Children run amok. These Democrats and the president. His plan calls for unbelievable amount of more spending. His plan, from what's leaked, of course, he hasn't met his constitutional responsibilities or his legal responsibilities. He said, I guess the dog chewed up his homework again. His plan puts us at $1 trillion or more deficit spending for the next, I think, 4 or 5 years. How could you possibly present that to the American people?
You can't, but let's start with the good news. The good news is that we're back to regular order. You can't do anything with two men in a room, which is what they tried to do with Boehner and Obama. That doesn't work. I think the public's entitled to a debate, entitled to see this stuff be rolled out on the House floor and the Senate floor, starting with the committees, so we can understand who's on first, who's on second, who's on third, how these ideas are evolving, and how they're going to try to come together. That's called regular order. We haven't had a budget in 1,400 days. The Senate hasn't passed a budget in 1,400 days. That's like, what, 4 years? Now, we're waiting for the Obama budget. That's supposed to come out in the next month or two. We already know what his spending plans are. So, this is kind of ridiculous. I saw the Wall Street Journal this morning. I like Paul Ryan, but I mean, this stuff is so high up in terms of its rhetoric and you'd like to believe it, but you can't understand where the foundations are to this stuff. And to do it, I have to be, again, a certified public accountant. You need to get back to structural reforms. We need a budget process that kind of pins the tail on the donkey. What's capital? What's operating expenses? What's government-sponsored enterprises? What's the trust funds? And what's the other parts of government? Those are three silos, with the third one being everything else besides trust funds and government-sponsored enterprises, divided into capital and non-capital. Then you begin to understand how this huge entity spends its money. You could talk forever about, like Ryan says, we got to reduce spending from 5% down to 3.4%. That's easier said than done. Where are the mechanics? Where are the professionals in the process that are going to now get into the bowels of government and figure out, number one, how are we spending that 5%, and where are we going to reduce it over 10 years to 3.4% as he wants? That's a good goal. And he said that if we do that by 2023, we will have reduced the debt to half of the gross domestic product. Another big goal, and another assumption, and it's kind of laden with a few assumptions that we've got to examine. Now, I like his spirit. I like the goal, but how do we get these two divided parties to get together? You don't hear a word on entitlements from Democrats. I saw Debbie Wasserman Schultz this morning, the head of the Democratic Party, and when they asked her on the Joe Scarborough show, now, what are you going to do about entitlements? What are you going to do about the age? Nothing. There's nothing wrong with the age. Now, all we're talking about is people under 55. We're not looking to deprive anybody ready to retire on a plan from their, from what they're due. So when are we going to get realistic and use common sense and get down and do the right thing for the American people? Because the American dream is in jeopardy. There's no question.
Joe, you talked about the process. Yeah. We talk as Republicans about three branches of government, but I don't often see Congress flexing its muscles. And I agree with you. The president should come to Congress. They shouldn't be getting in a car and always going to him. I mean, if you want to establish or reestablish your authority base, you don't play those kinds of games. But let's talk about what you talked about. We have chairmen of committees. They have the power to call witnesses. They have power to get people that will come in, no-nonsense people like you, and tell the truth, talk to fact, talk to policy, talk about reality, and encourage the media, in a sense, almost force the media to cover it, make sure through their offices that those clips are available for the evening news. They can do it if they want. It seems that they talk to each other down there in Washington, and I would have thought after the McCain and the Romney routes that they need to learn how to communicate.
Absolutely. And if I were chairman, let's say, of the Financial Services Committee, and I had read the financial statement of the United States of America, which I referred to before. It just came out for the fiscal year September 30th, 2012. And I saw that the 6-page opinion in front of the 230 pages went on to say that we can't render an opinion on the financial statements. This is signed by the Treasury Secretary and the Comptroller General. And the main thing that they're articulating is that there are so many material weaknesses in the books of the Defense Department. And we all know there's been waste. I mean, you heard about the $8 billion on pallets that weighed tons and just got lost of cash. This is U.S. cash going to Iraq. That's part of it. So I would call them in to say, now, let's talk about these material weaknesses. And why is it in your 6-page letter, you said it's been 14 years, but we expect to have this thing done by the year 2017. Why should we wait so long to get a good set of books that can be audited? And why are we?
Well, for example, Joe, I love Mr. Coburn. I love his report every year telling us about waste. What I don't hear is, this is what we're going to do to demand that we don't report it every year. I mean, nobody seems to ask. You know, it's great. We all get excited. Wow, look at, he's pointed out another 240 billion of waste. My question is, what are you going to do about it?
You're right. And one of the things that I proposed back in 1992, when I was the chairman of an emerging task force on emerging issues called Truth in Budgeting and Accounting, was to strengthen the Chief Financial Officer Act that I introduced, because they dumbed it down when they passed it. And instead of putting in professional CPAs and certified financial managers at the top, and we have 35 CFOs and one big one at the top, they made the top layer political appointments, and they put the deputies as the professionals. And then they put the whole thing under the OMB rather than a separate, not like the Fed exactly, but somewhat independent, so that you'd have the head CFO with a 10-year term, not coterminous with any president. Now the public would get confidence in the fact that we have some independence. Not only don't we have that, we don't have independent accounting firms coming in to do the audit.